Hello, my beautiful, gorgeous dance baby, and welcome to another episode of More Than Dance. Today, we are discussing one of my, how do I say this nicely, least favorite phrases to hear. And I'm going to give you a second to think about what that is. 3, 2, 1. I'm sure some of you that know me, you're like, oh, it's can't, but we already did an episode on that. That is definitely one of my least favorites. But another one that's up there is I'm too old for that. Man, this one really gets me. I can already feel like the fire inside me. One of my students is being confronted with the fact that she is aging and she's getting older and how things feel different. And I turn to the idea of self-acceptance when I think about that. Obviously, none of us, I think, really want to get older. I think that we're all just like living the life of what's naturally happening. Naturally, we're aging. And when we have compassion and self-acceptance with ourselves, we're able to accept it in a very different way than if we did not have self-acceptance or compassion. And part of that is recognizing the change and recognizing the differences. And maybe like when you wake up, you'd wake up differently than you did 10 years ago. Maybe you look in the mirror and you look different. Maybe you're like, oh boy, like I feel like things are changing. And okay, so they're changing. And it's not about them not changing. It's not about, let me figure out how these things don't matter. It's about realizing that they do matter and that that's just part of life. So to give yourself the compassion to be like, okay, well, that's part of this agreement that we have, like with the universe. Like we all know that we're going to get old. Like I think I recognized that when I was like 8, like, okay, eventually like that'll be me. And I think we're very aware of that. And that's sometimes taken in the very opposite way. So have you ever said to yourself, well, I'm so young right now, I'll do that when I'm older. And that can sometimes be equally detrimental to your thinking because you're thinking, well, I've got time for that and I'll do that later and I'll push that off. And actually, I'm so guilty of that right now. I'm thinking like, wow, that's literally what I thought about my dance studio. I was thinking, I'm so young right now, I am not going to open up a dance studio. Fast forward 1 year later, and I did. However, imagine if I thought that way of thinking, like someone who owns a dance studio is older than I am now. That's what I thought. That was my way of thinking. That was my excuse for not opening up the studio right away. I'll do it later. Have you ever done something like that where you've put something off because you didn't feel old enough for it? It's almost like I need these qualifiers in my life before I do this really big thing. I have that currently right now. I think there might be a time in my life where I write a book and I think I'm going to do that when I'm older. And I think about that because I'm going to have way more insight than I currently do now. And it could be right. It could be true. Just like this podcast, like I think I have way more insight right now speaking to you in this time in my life than if I started my podcast earlier. We know I wanted to. I've shared that with you, but I have different insight now. I'm a different human now. That's not to say that the podcast that I would have started when I was younger, had I done that, it probably would have had different content, different things to share. My audience might have been different. So if you're a younger baby watching this right now, I am sharing this with you too, because the quicker that we get to adapt this notion of thinking that, one, we are not old for anything. We can do whatever we want when we want to do it. The sooner we get to learn that is the sooner we get to put it into action and thrive off of the benefits from it. If you can learn to not limit yourself now, then when you actually are old, you'll have way more practice putting that into place. You'll have way more practice with the reframe. You'll have a different way of thinking. The people around you will be saying you're old. You'll be like, excuse me. And you'll be experiencing joy and living life. And you'll be fearless. After teaching for over 2 decades, I can say that the biggest challenge with dance is mindset. It's the biggest one. So if we can conquer our mindset and be able to think in a way that lets us see life in a more limitless way, we'll do more. We'll trust more. Really, I'm talking about all excuses. So not just I'm old, but also I'm overweight for this, I'm not sexy enough for this, or I'm too young for this. So when I'm talking about this as I go on in this episode, just think about a common excuse that you give yourself and see how it fits into this framework. The reason why I get this phrase so much is because if you don't know, I own a dance studio in Providence, Rhode Island, and I teach adults how to dance. I teach adults how to find their sexy and find their confidence through movement. I teach people how to love their bodies. I teach people how to feel good in lingerie. I teach people how to find their inner self. And some of that work is through the exposure of clothing that may be more revealing. It's through the idea of movement as an art form. However, when people are looking at it, it might appear as sexy. And I feel like there is a part of history that is missing with me. And it's kind of like, I think in another episode, I like blamed it on the Puritans. I haven't fact checked that yet or even really thoroughly like delved into it too much. Though I think it is something to do with kind of like this shunning of the human body and sexuality and certain things with dance, I guess in my world too, is taboo. And like even Josh and I, we have a boudoir studio and like, ooh, boudoir, like, ooh, how risky, how risque. And it's funny because if you know our name, it's Risky Boudoir, which is like my name reversed around with letters spelling Risky. So I've gotten very familiar with excuses. I don't think you're too old for anything. And I think the real thing that comes with age is when you're learning something new, there's an expectation that you might put on yourself. My gosh, there's like so many angles to look at this. We've got the angle of, okay, you're old, you're brittle, like you're hurting, things are different. You're going to move differently. Okay, I understand. That's why we have modifications. We cannot really use that as an excuse. Why? Because it's almost like saying like, just give up. Don't walk then. Why are you walking? Might as well just get one of those rolly things. That's not what you're doing. You're still maintaining your stride. You're maintaining your walk. You're probably still having sex. That's movement. So when we think about dance, why does dance have this like extra elevated, like it's because there's this expectation around dance for whatever reason. Oh, I can't dance. I can't tell you how many people, like I will say, I teach people how to dance. Oh, I can't dance. Like, okay, all right. Like, calm down. One, I didn't ask you. Two, like we're just at a wedding having a conversation. Three, you're never going to learn how to dance unless you learn how to dance. It's not like walking in that respect. It's like walking in the respect that like movement is similar. It's coordinated. You're transferring weight. You're expressing your own style within your walk. You're expressing your internal self when you walk, even if you don't know it. I'm sure you've seen people with a confident walk. You've seen people with a very like dim walk and you kind of like look at them and you're like, wow, what's going on there? We have this exercise that we do at the studio and it's examine someone else's walk. And it's really cool to do because one, it's really insightful. You get a chance to really observe someone's walk. And then we stand up and we walk like that person. So that means that our observations translate into our own bodies. We break our own walking habits and therefore walk like that person. So that means that we're looking at their posture. We're looking at where their shoulders fall, how their head goes, if they have a smile on their face, if they're dim, if their feet turn in when they walk, if their weight transfers through kind of like their hips with a lag. We're looking at if their hips are tilted forward or tilted back. Are they leaning with their hips projected forward and the rest of their posture is kind of like back? Anyway, there's so many things to look at. And we do that exercise because it helps on both ends. One, when you're the walker, you're learning a lot by what the other person is showing you when they do your walk. So you have an opportunity to maybe adjust your posture or to get recognized with, oh, okay, like I'm a happy walker, or I walk confidently, or wow, like I got to check that. Why am I always looking at the floor? It's a kind of a fun exercise. The reason why I brought this up is because when we think about the person who is telling themselves that they're too old or that they can't dance because they're too old, they're adding a limit to their life. It's funny because I'm trying to put myself in that perspective, and it's hard for me too because I'm not there. So I'm not able to empathize with like what it feels like to be old. I know what it feels like personally to be injured. That's what I can kind of compare it to. And I think about some of the classes that I used to teach. Like I used to teach a class called Gold and Fit. And I would teach these ladies, just very, very basic and simple strength exercises. And I did that for a really long time. And it was to increase movement throughout older people's lives and to give them something that was manageable and doable. It was kind of like a total sculpt class, but for elderly. So it was keeping in mind like dexterity and balance and having modifications even amped up, maybe even starting with the modification, using bands and different kinds of resistances versus like the standard weights, doing things in a chair versus doing things always standing. And that class really, it was almost like the power of that room was, hey, we're all in here and we can all do this. And then I know that when they stepped out of that room, life would go back to the way that it was for them before they started taking that class. And because they're older, the limit of their life came back. So the limit of, I'm not able to do this because I'm old. And I also think like being cautious is one thing, but telling yourself you can't do something is a whole other thing. There's so many ways that I've shown up to the studio cautious. I'm cautious right now. I have a slight hip injury, and every time I go to lift my leg, I'm cautious. Every time that I go to get to the floor and get up, I'm thinking of it. I'm being mindful of it. So I'm too old for that. Well, okay, like I'm too injured for that. Do you see how it's kind of like it's more of an excuse versus a reason? I want to step into the zone more of kind of like this sexuality piece that comes with dancing and back to the whole like Puritans thing, the stuff that's taboo, the stuff that women can't do, the stuff that like is suggestive, which kind of just, it bugs me, I guess, that in this 2025 year, the expression of dance in the way that we do it still has judgment behind it. And I see it on my YouTube. Just the other day, one of my clients was like, I'm a wedding DJ, and he was so cute. He was like, oh yeah, my wedding planner was like, oh my God, is she a stripper? And like, I'm not right now anyway. But he was like, no, she empowers women and she teaches people how to dance. And it was like, I didn't hear it, but it was almost like he knew that she was putting judgment on in some way. It could have been just like a question, a genuine question. I don't know. I wasn't there. But I think like the fact that he told me about it and that he was showing me how he like stood up for what I do was really like sweet to, one, hear him say, and then two, just got me thinking like these limits, where they come from and why they're still here. And I'm old is one of the biggest ones. That's too sexy is another one. I'm out of shape. That's another one that gets me, because one of the things that could get you in shape when you're out of shape is dance. So this episode is really about talking about this myth and this funny excuse that kind of like gets passed along. Like it's almost like once you get into the old club, like now you get to use that excuse. So it's like, oh yeah, like I'm old. I'm gonna use that now. And I'm sure like I'll probably catch myself saying it, and then I'll remember this conversation right now that I'm having with you, and I'll be like, oh, like you're doing that. Oh my gosh. Another thing too that's funny about old and age is like it's so relative. When you're 10, when you hear that someone's 20, you're like, whoa, they're old. I remember being like 16 and someone telling me that they're like 23. It was like, oh my God, you are 23? Like, you are old. And then, you know, as you grow up, you just keep pushing that bracket of numbers. So it's like what used to be old for you is like, oh, that wasn't old, because you're noticing that you're getting closer to these numbers. People are doing incredible things at all ages. And that's the point, is they're doing things. So I think the matter is this belief of what's possible, which ties into the episode right before this on role models, because when we think about our role models, we think, okay, well, that's possible. It's possible because I see it and I believe it. My friend's ballet teacher, I think she was like 80 something when she stopped teaching dance. That's inspiration for me as a dance teacher, like knowing like, okay, well, she was teaching until she was 80 something. Like that is cool. I know that that movement probably looked very different to the movement that, maybe it didn't. There's like this 79-year-old gymnast that like does this crazy stuff on a parallel bar. I gotta find that video. But we see what's possible and then we can live up to it. So I'm here to challenge you in thinking about this in the way that you're thinking about it. Like sometimes, wouldn't it be so nice to just know that it's possible without needing the proof. Like, when do we get to be the proof? There was no dance studio like my studio when I opened my studio. There was nothing like it. So, in a sense, like, that was my proof that I'm building for anyone else. When I started DJing weddings, I didn't personally know any woman DJ. I knew that there were DJs that were female. Now I know some DJs that are female, but not a lot. I personally know one, and I've heard of another. So it's like this idea of paving your own way with little to no proof. And that boils down to trust. And it's a lot of trust, and it's a lot of being bold. Sometimes it's not about how you're feeling old. Sometimes it's more about your sense of belonging and feeling like you might be out of place if you are older and doing something around people who are younger. So it's about having the courage to do things that put you in a situation where you might feel like, I'm a little out of place. I have a student who approached me and she was like, do you have more people my age that come here? And I was like, not yet. And I love when I have people who are older coming to the studio because it really is paving that way. I think I have about, I don't know, at this time, like maybe like 5 people who are like frequent dancers that come through, and they're in an age range that's above the average age range. And I think that it's kind of funny because it's something that I want to leave open. I could have a class like my Golden Fit class, right? And market to that. That's not my market, though. My market is a woman who wants to dance, a man who wants to dance, a couple who wants to dance. So it's not really like a person this age that wants to dance. I mean, I'm not marketing to kids. However, if a kid's mother called me up and they wanted to do a private with me, am I going to do it? Yeah, I would. So when she asked me this, she was like, oh, yeah, it would be cool if you had like a class for us like oldies. And I was like, well, come to all the classes that we have and like you get to pave the way. And once people start seeing you, they'll see that inspiration, and that ripple effect will begin where they're going to be like, oh, well, there's people my age there, and they'll start to come. So that sense of belonging can happen, and that feeling of I'm out of place won't feel as strong. Another way to feel less out of place, though, is to feel more secure with your goal and what you're doing. So if your goal is, I'm going to learn how to dance, at some point it's got to not matter around you who's dancing and who's not dancing. You know that movie with Robert De Niro and Anne Hathaway, The Intern? It's so cute if you haven't seen it. Here he is, and he's this intern at this company. It's just like a different expectation because he's older, and it was shown beautifully in the movie. And, you know, the way people are like kind of talking to him and the way he's learning and different types of insight that he has being someone who is older. It becomes such a beautiful partnership, and it kind of like is so cyclical, and it makes the world go round. I guess that's the phrase for it. And it allows us to have respect for all of the different ages that we get to experience. The idea of being a beginner and being someone who's older as a beginner, that could feel really uncomfortable. That could feel really out of place. Like, not only am I older than the group, I'm a real beginner. And it's so funny because I can say this, no one's thinking of you. Like, they're not. You're thinking of it in such a higher way, in such a more vibrant way. They probably like might notice it, like, oh, cool, like she's here. That's like literally what that's going to be. That's probably the end of it. And then that person is so hyper-focused on themselves, just like you are so hyper-focused on yourself with your own experience, with your own learning, that at the end of the day, when you're in a real deep learning experience, it's a really egocentric experience for everyone. Everyone's in their own zone, as they get to be, because everyone has individual goals. This big fear of looking stupid comes in again. I don't want to be the one in there looking stupid, looking old. The phrase I'm old can become a reflex, and it's putting up a shield that feels like it's a protection, but really it's prohibiting you from experiencing life and doing things that you might really want to do. Using it can rob you of opportunities, prevent you from fun, from relationships, from growth, from being you, from experiencing joy. Dance does not care about age. Movement is movement. I have this student who comes to the studio, and she celebrated her 62nd birthday with us in July. And she is so involved in so many activities. Like, she does chorus, she does ballroom, she dances with us, and she travels. And I feel like I've never ever heard her say, I'm too old for that. Like, I think she very much recognizes that she's older and that she is doing what she's doing. I think she takes care of her body and understands her limitations. So like sometimes at the studio, she'll even tell me like, I'm not going to do that. And I can appreciate the announcement because I expect her now at this point to know her own modifications because she's been dancing with me for 2 years. So she knows her limitations, and if she knows how to modify, and if she doesn't, I know that she'll ask me. And we talk about the differences between certain dances, getting up from the floor, going down to the floor. Like, as we age, those things are going to become more difficult. It's just a fact. So we have strategies for how to do that. And in fact, it doesn't even have to do with age. It could literally be respiratory things. It could be like injuries, modifications. It can happen for any reason. It doesn't have to be for being old. And there's this one dance that I remember doing completely standing up, even all the parts that were on the floor. I had a couple people that were not able to go to the floor, and I just was like, okay, we'll do this movement. They were able to execute the full routine standing up versus going to the floor. We've had people with shoulder injuries, with wrist surgeries, with you name it. It's probably something I've seen. There's always a way to figure out how to dance. And I also have this other student, and you probably heard me talk about him. I think he's going to turn 83, and he dances with me every Friday. And he comes to the studio for his dance lesson, and he's been doing this since 2014. And the movement, of course, looks very different than the class that I had the night before or the class I might have later that night. However, not once is he saying to me, like, I'm too old for this. I've got a blank, blank, blank. What he does say is, I think I'm going to take a break after we do like a routine. He'll be like, okay, I need to rest. And he monitors himself that way. And watching these students keep dance a part of their life when they are old is actually beautiful, because we all know dance is so helpful for the memory, and it's helpful for keeping your mind sharp, and it's helpful for endurance and keeping things like beautiful, because dance is so beautiful. Can you imagine like if he said he was too old to dance? Like, this is my client now. How many years is this? My gosh, 11 years. Is that right? 11 years every Friday. Imagine if he like had this random cutoff when he turned 75 and he was like, oh, yep, that's the year that I'm too old. No, he just allowed himself to adapt. And yeah, like 10 years ago when we started, it looked different for sure. And he found a way. And that's what I'm trying to tell you, is you get to find a way. And that goes with all of the excuses that you're making. And sometimes it's just about looking at things just a little bit differently and having the courage to be a little different. So when you get older, you get to treat dance and movement and running, whatever exercise you do, differently. You get to challenge yourself with it, and you get to adapt to it. You get to change things up. And really, you get to prevent yourself from being old. How many old people do you know that are actually so not old? Like, they don't act old. And then you've got like younger people potentially that are acting old. Like, wow, that person's acting old because you can visibly see them giving up. You can see them not try. You can see that they've accepted laziness. So when I hear, oh, I'm too old, I hear, oh, you're too old to learn something new. You're stopping. You have decided that you're done growing. You decided that you want to stop having fun. You stop making room for play. A great way to maybe think about this differently is to say, I'm not old. I'm just getting started. Or I may be older than the people in this group, and I'm an inspiration. And I think what comes from this is this challenge of the next time that you notice that you're making an excuse, and it could be any excuse that you make, could be the ones I mentioned before, or I'm not sexy, so I can't dance sexy, or I'm out of shape, so I shouldn't dance. Embrace that sentence with a challenge. Are you really old, or are you scared? Are you really out of shape and really see that there's no possible way to get in shape with movement like dance? Or are you being lazy? Are you really not sexy? Or are you scared to be sexy because what it means for society and you and your history with who knows, family, friends, judgment? And then you can ask yourself this question. Do you want to live this life on the sidelines, watching other people younger than you, people who are in more shape than you, people who are sexier than you, living this life that you know you could live deep down, but you're too scared to live? Or do you want to live this chapter full out and see what's possible by taking just a small risk of exposing yourself and being maybe a person in the room that is older than others, or being someone in the room that is more out of shape than the people in the group? They started where you are. And then also remember that you get to choose youth at any age by choosing energy, by choosing curiosity, and by choosing joy. I'm curious what excuse is holding you back and what you're going to say to it in this coming week. If this was helpful for you at all, I would love to ask you for a 5-star written review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Thank you so much, and I'll see you on the dance floor.